It's Sunday, March 24th, 2024, 3 p.m. in the afternoon. You're joining me for our regularly scheduled play-by-mail game. And today we're playing the third and final clue letter for a case from Dear Holmes called The Found Key. Lots of theories on this case being discussed by the channel. Maybe more than most of the cases we play, most of the Dear Holmes cases we've played. This one has seemed to have captured the interest of the audience. We'll go over some theories from the Discord. YouTube says 10 concurrent viewers, 3 likes. Let's do a little bookkeeping before we get started. Last week, we played through this case behind me here, Medical Mysteries, 4 cases and a tutorial, so 5 sessions in total. We finished the last one last night, Saturday evening. A very good box of cases, something quite different, quite unusual, very deftly handled, very polished, and feels to me like it would make a great mystery game for people who don't normally like these killer murder mysteries. I will try to record a spoiler-free review in the next couple of days. In other bookkeeping, next week, if all goes well, we will read the solution from Holmes for the case we're playing today, The Found Key. I'll note it has not arrived yet. We purposefully have been staggering these playthroughs to give time for the Dear Holmes letters to arrive, but it's clear they don't quite make their schedule of 1 letter a week. But I am hoping we will get the letter in time for next week. I expect we will. However, in addition to next Sunday's 3 p.m. Dear Holmes, I have scheduled for next Sunday at 1 p.m. a live Q&A channel update. This one will be a little special because it'll be the 3-year anniversary of the channel. And I have some things I want to talk to the audience about, most notably a restarting of the Patreon so that I can ask for help purchasing some of the games we play on the channel. As you know, I purchase all the games we play myself so that we can remain completely unbiased and unattached to any publishers or anything like that. I'm actually kind of excited about it, about talking about it. And I'll take any questions anyone has on any issues, board games, mystery games, the craziness of YouTube. That will be Sunday at 1 p.m. And if you can't make it live, or if you just want to post questions ahead of time, you can post those on the Board Game Geek Guild for this channel. You'll find a link to that on the About page of the YouTube. Or you can email it to me. There's lots of ways to get in touch. All right, let's check in with the chat, see how everyone's doing before we do a recap on today's case. We've got our usual Dear Holmes people, including some new people. Rob, who has been with us for a while, and Rob, you might remember, helped prepare some very beautiful looking facsimile documents for the custom play-by-mail case we made that was written by Matt. Has a bunch of theories, and he's written up some of his list of questions we have for this case and his guesses at answers. I'm not sure. We should start today by recapping last week's letter, but then we have to make a decision. Should we spend some time coming up with theories before we read today's letter, or should we jump into today's letter first and then talk about theories informed by that letter? And this is actually an issue that sort of cleaves the players sometimes, because some people are of the opinion Why prematurely try to figure out theories when you've got information that will help you with that? And that's sort of Sherlock Holmes's approach, Arthur Conan Doyle's approach, which is gather data, don't prematurely try to figure things out. Focus on gathering data, and then when you've gathered all the data, the solution will be clear. However, I take a different approach, different view, which is that we're trying to do two things. We're trying to solve cases, but we're also trying to learn about how the mind works and how mysteries are constructed and when the mind fails. And because of that, it seems quite frequently useful to try to develop theories early and then over time reflect on how well your models worked. Where did you make mistakes? And so when we play, we tend to spend some time constructing theories of the case prematurely and then watch as they get winnowed out and as we focus in on the right solution. It's also part of the fun. Okay, so let's do a little bit of a recap of our last letter. We've only got 2 letters so far. It feels like we've had more. But let's do a little recap of the case and the previous letter. So what is our case? Here's our first letter. We've got a dead lawyer found in a secret apartment in a bad area of town. He's found stabbed in the heart with a 10-inch long curved blade. In addition, his hand is cut off and missing, cut off by a different knife. On the wall or floor near the body is a number 389. And a key in his pocket labeled 103. Going backwards now to the last time he was seen. He's married, he's rich. He's a sort of prestigious lawyer who likes to keep up appearances. He departed from his home around 7 p.m., telling his wife he had to take care of something that couldn't wait. It can't wait any longer, he said, but I'll be back by 9 or 9:30. Then he never comes back. That's June 3rd, the night of June the 3rd. June 4th, the wife starts panicking. That he's found on the 5th in this apartment in a bad area of town that no one knows why he has. There are some apparent bugs in the game. We found several discrepancies. One thing says the bloody number was written on the wall, one says on the ground, etc. The neighbors are canvassed. We're told that most of the people coming into the apartment seem to be Asian. They come in groups of 2 or 3, but there is 2 white men seen in the apartment over time. We're told how long he's been renting the apartment. I forget the exact number, but quite a while. We're told he's found by a delivery guy delivering a custom locket that was ordered. Another discrepancy. In one place, we're told that the locket is found on his person. Here, we're told that the delivery guy for the locket shop found the body. Not clear. Feels to us like these are bugs, but we don't know. Okay, so there's the 389 on the wall. We know our guy Hertz, the lawyer who was killed, has long ties to the Orient and can speak the language. This whole case is set in San Francisco. The wife hires a private eye. He tells us that she's going to put the an ad in the paper trying to find information. The private investigator is a little skeptical of that. Later, it turns out that that was useful in finding where that key came from. We're told about our lawyer's secretary, Mr. Reynolds, who's all properly dressed. He also tells us, the private investigator, that he's investigated the wife a little bit, and the helpers of the house don't think the husband and wife are sleeping together. We're told about a tense relationship with sister, who he snuck around, read some letter in her room, and then kicked her out. We're going to meet with her today, it sounds like. And then the father is mentioned as getting a stipend from the husband. One of our key insights from the first letter was the idea that perhaps our guy Hertz, Cornelius Hertz, is gay, and maybe is seeing the secretary, who he's been long friends with, as his lover. They both seem like there are hints they might be gay. They're sort of confirmed bachelors, fancy dressers. He's not sleeping with his wife. They are very close, the two of them. So, and they've gotten into a quarrel recently. And the quarrel is interesting. It seems to be about, and maybe we should, he got into a quarrel with his sister, but he also gets into a quarrel with Reynolds, who's been his good friends. Maybe we don't learn about that till the next letter. Here are the questions that Watson challenges us to answer. Who would bear a significant motive to harm Mr. Hertz, and in such a particularly gruesome way, cutting off his hand? Were there collaborators? The cryptic message found at the scene, the 389 in blood, could hold a clue to the identity of the perpetrator. What secret does it hide? And then what's going on with the locket? Who bought it, and who was it for? That's letter 1. Now, letter 2 filled in a bunch of stuff that seemed not relevant, more on some workers at the house, a cook, Jasper O'Connor, a housekeeper whose sister was pilfering stuff from the house. The only thing that occurred to me as we reread that is, if there are secrets in the house, remember, we think that Hertz may have found his sister writing. Our theory was, they call each other backstabbers, and when the wife asks what happened with the sister, the fight that got her kicked out, he says she wrote some vulgarities. So we were thinking that she might have been discovered that he's gay and is writing about it. Remember, this is in 1901. It would have been a scandal, and he's very much concerned about appearances. So if you have a thieving sister of one of the workers, she could have come across the letter. That could be involved in blackmail. Doesn't appear to be. Most of this seems to be red herrings. More on Reynolds and when they started getting in a fight. They've known each other as children, it looks like, or college. There's a talk about Reynolds being a bachelor, and once he thought he found love, but he doesn't want to talk about it. He likes solitude. When she asks Hertz about it, the wife, he told her that Reynolds discovered her feelings. He once loved someone, her feelings were insecure. So that made us wonder a little bit if our theory of them being gay is wrong. A little odd. We should say that the locket has a young woman in it that we can't identify. The wife looks at it, doesn't identify it, and it's got an inscription saying something like "Forever in my heart." So we don't really understand what's going on there. Okay, more on the relationship between Reynolds and Hertz. They used to be a daily visitor for a couple until, let's see, how long ago? He used to come many days of the week. He wrote up the papers. I forget how long it was, weeks or so ago. And then they get into a fight, partly because Reynolds seems to be chummy with one of the employees. That seems like it could be a jealousy element. But then I guess in the first letter was a discussion about Reynolds accused him of having funds that are unreported overseas. And the connection we made is that our guy Hertz may be dealing with Japanese mafia, Yakuza. And one of the early observations was that there's a card table in the secret apartment, and 389 is related to 983, something like that, a card game that Yakuza are known for playing. In fact, that's what the name comes from. So that's still our primary theory, that he's upset some Yakuza. The cutting off of the hand sort of matches Japanese mafia tactics, where they would cut off a finger when the person, when a Yakuza soldier messes up. You cut off your pinky or your finger and you hand it to the boss as your way of saying sorry. And lots of cultures have traditions where they cut off the hands of a thief. So we thought maybe that's a signal that Hertz was stealing from them, so they cut off his hand. Continuing with our letter from last week, more on the possibility. So here's interesting, where Reynolds says, Reynolds is agitated, fearful after Cornelius's death. He's worried the number found painted at the site of the murder is related to a Japanese criminal organization. So this is in line with our theory that the Yakuza have cut off his hand and the 389 is their message. Reynolds seems to be agreeing with us, unless one of the theories in the channel is that this has been staged to look like Yakuza. And the number 389 is not quite right. It should be 983 or whatever the channel can remind me. So this is either confirmation of our theory or Reynolds trying to encourage us in the wrong direction. We hear about the chauffeur who was let go and might bear some animosity. The wife visits the shop that made the locket, and we get this very odd conversation from the locket maker, the silversmith, whose name is Eustace Grimes, who's described as silver-haired. That's a little suspicious because we're told that at the scene of the apartment, a white-haired white man may have been seen leaving the scene of the crime the morning of the murder. So that's a little suspicious. We don't otherwise know who that might be. He tells her that about the inscription, and how it said something like he wanted a plain square locket, something to fit this particular photo. Little misleading how it was, whether he left him with the photo or not. And then he says what the inscription should say. He confirms that the receipt is from C. Hertz. That seems to definitively tell us that the person who commissioned it was Hertz. That sounds like our guy Cornelius Hertz, unless it was a different family member or someone gave a fake name. But it sure sounds like Cornelius has commissioned it. Doesn't tell us who he was purchasing it for, however. And it said, the inscription said something like, thinking of you always, or always in my heart, is what it was going to say. But then he changed his mind. We should refresh our memory of what he changed it to. Does anyone remember what he changed it to? What did it actually say? We're going to look at that in a second. But the silversmith says this is what he was originally going to have the inscription say. And maybe that's a clue. Like, maybe if our theory of gay lovers is true, and I thought maybe someone could be cross-dressing in this photograph, maybe this would be too revealing. Anyway, he changed it from one of these to something else. And then the silversmith jokes and says, hey, was this for, or was this for your, maybe he's not joking. He says, it was for a younger woman. So he says, is this a gift for your daughter or niece? And then he sort of jokes and goes, or maybe somebody you love. And Hertz surprises him by saying, yes, it's someone I love. So a young woman, too young for him, he says, is someone I loved. Okay. And then the silversmith said, hey, someone else came looking for the locket, asking about the locket. And it wasn't your PI. What did they mainly want to know? They were well-dressed, maybe 50 years old or a little bit younger. And they wanted to know who commissioned the piece. Very strange thing. Okay, well, that's where we left off. I just want to remind myself what the inscription on the locket currently, eventually said. Left hand removed. Had been renting the apartment for 8 months. This is important. I guess I didn't recap the Jason Phelps thing. There's a card table there. So in our second letter, what I skipped over is that after she put her ad in the paper, let's see. It may have been the PI who calls us. Someone, a boarding house guy, comes forward. And he tells us he recognized the 103 key. Now, a huge clue is that the guy who recognized the photo in the paper, now that is not clear to us what photo he's talking about, but he says, the boarding house guy says, the photo looked like someone staying at my boarding house. Then I realized I was wrong. Not the same guy. That made us think maybe they're related. But he says, okay, so this guy in my boarding house, I recognize the 103 key mentioned in the paper because it belongs to this guy in my boarding house named Jason Phelps, who's been staying here for 5 months. Now, remember, he's been renting the apartment now for 8 months. So this is kind of significant. The renting of the apartment predates Phelps being in the area by a couple months. Okay, and then we're told he came looking in February, looking for work from Seattle. He did get work as a fisherman down by the wharf, which is near where this apartment is, we think. And then on June 1st, no, not June 1st, a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, he came to him and said, I lost my key. He got a new one. Then this week, he said, I'll soon have the money to pay you to pay for the key I lost, because you're going to have to change the lock. And then he disappeared. So is it a clue that he said he'll soon have the money? I don't think so. I don't think it's a lot of money. This made some people think of blackmail or whatever, but it feels like it's normal money. It seems like this guy is working as a fisherman, because when we follow up, we find the bar he hangs out in. He's normally there late in afternoons after fishing day was done. So I think he is working as a fisherman. Normally on Tuesdays and Thursdays, that's a little bit of a clue. He normally sits alone, but sometimes he's joined by a man, a well-dressed man. Now, the question is this Hertz or is this Reynolds or someone else? 3 times he's visited by this man. They kind of hang out in the back of the bar, whispering. The older man who visits him is focused on him. And then they meet, they talk, never for more than an hour, and then they leave. But the last time they left together. And he thinks that was 2 weeks ago. So there's our recap of the case. I can see the chat has been chatting about theories, but before we continue, Did I leave anything important out of the recap before we get to theories and issues? Let me know. Let me check in on the chat and talk about some theories that are going back and forth. Let's see. Can I scroll up here? Okay. Veggie Dogs, no, wait, see, okay. The locket inscription only said Hertz. Okay, good. So he finally changed it to saying Hertz. The client was considering something longer, like always thinking of you are always in my heart. Petiel says, I thought that was Hertz being wary of being too close to his employees, not that Reynolds was too close to someone else. Petiel is talking about the odd comment about being too close to his employees. Okay, that's a good clarification if that's why he was trying to keep some distance from Reynolds. Veggie Dog says, I'm now firmly believing that Yakuza is not involved at all. Rob says, interesting, most of our theories at least have them in the background somehow. The people visiting the South Park apartment sure seem to be Yakuza. I think there are absolutely Yakuza involved, and meeting there to play cards seems highly likely, or to do business. I don't see how you get away from that. Now, it could still be that it's made to look like it was Yakuza that killed him, but I don't see how you avoid the idea that there are Yakuza meeting in that apartment. And you have to answer why he's renting that apartment. There's no bed there, so it's not a secret place to sleep. He comes home to sleep. So he's spending afternoons there. We don't know what. Veggie Dog says, the Asian men are not Yakuza. They're everyday blue-collar Japanese businessmen. Hertz has some small side importing business going with them. Reynolds knows about this. That's interesting. I mean, they're coming in with their collars in 2s or 3s, so... But it's an interesting theory. Veggie Dog says the business was doing the paperwork for it. Okay. The second office near the wharf was required for this business. Reynolds was sometimes there when the Asian men visited. One or more times a card game broke out and they played the Japanese. It's an interesting theory. Veggie Dog says the card game was Oichokabu. It was explained to the Americans, including Reynolds, what 893 hand translates to Yakuza. And 893 has been used as a Yakuza gang tag. This is just a recap of the theory that the Yakuza play this game. But Veggie Dog's theory is that Reynolds kills Hertz, panics, tries to cover his tracks, knowing the Asian men have been coming to the office, remembering being told about the Yakuza tag, paints the 389 on the floor. Unfortunately for him, the incorrect order of the 893 Yakuza tag proves it was fake. The Yakuza doesn't send messages cryptically, they'd get the number right. So this is the theory that it really wasn't Yakuza because the Yakuza wouldn't get the 389 wrong. It's an interesting, reasonable theory. Unfortunately, it's complicated by the fact that we seem to have discovered a bunch of bugs in this game. So it's not quite clear when we find a problem whether it's a bug or meant to be significant. Rob says, I'm still betting on Yakuza. The Orientals visiting the apartments were described as well-dressed in black and folded-up collars. I agree that that does seem to point to Japanese Yakuza. Joe J. Anderson says, are there more than 2 reasons why the numbers on the floor were in the wrong order? The person writing it did not know the correct order, or the order is changed for a reason that means something? Petiel seems to agree with that. Seems weird to me that you would know the 3 numbers and not know the order of them. Okay. Well, that's the end of the chat channel. Okay, so the chat did not answer me about my recap. So that's typical problem here. Let's look at some of the summary that Rob wrote up of questions and his guesses. These are questions we have outstanding and Rob's guesses. So Rob has a theory that this was suicide and that someone has covered it up to make it look like murder. I'd like to hear the motive for covering up a suicide, though. Let's see. So here are the questions. Who killed him? Why was his hand cut off? Rob's answer is to make it look like a Yakuza murder. What does the 389 mean? That was the Yakuza code, but wrong. Where did he go to Phelps' room? Okay, so a big thing that I noticed in our first letter, which we haven't talked about today, is that Hertz leaves his house at 7, says he'll be back by 9, and a witness says he got to the secret apartment at 10. So the question is, where was he in those hours that he thought he'd be back and wasn't? And we think now that he might have been to Phelps's apartment. That would make sense. Okay. What was the apartment used for? Shady business with the Yakuza. Who was the other American seen at the apartment? Could be Phelps, could be Reynolds. Rob thinks it was Phelps. Who is Jason Phelps? Rob thinks he was a blackmailer. I find that a little hard to believe, to be honest. Who is the man seen with Phelps in the bar? Hertz. Why did Hertz have Phelps' key to break into his room? So one question we had was, has Hertz stolen the key? Or has Phelps given him a key and then lied to the landlord and said, I lost one and I need another one? It's a little troubling for us because feels like if you needed an extra key you wanted to give to someone, you would just go and have an extra key made. So that does make me think he actually lost it or it was stolen. Why has Phelps disappeared? Has he run off or has he been murdered? Rob thinks he just ran off once the blackmail income died. Who purchased the locket? Hertz. Who is it for? Hertz. So Rob thinks he bought the locket for himself. Who's the woman in the locket? Rob thinks it's Reynolds' lost love. That needs to be explained, why he has a picture of Reynolds' lost love in his locket. Who is the man visiting the silversmith asking about the locket? Rob thinks that's Reynolds. Who was the white-haired man seen at the crime scene? Rob thinks maybe Hertz's father, who we've just heard about in passing. Why was Hertz going through his sister's papers to keep track of her? What did his sister argue about? Revealing something to their father. That doesn't really answer the question. What did Hertz and Reynolds argue about? And we're told what they argued about, that it was something about funds in Japan, but Rob thinks it was really about Hertz seeing Phelps. And then Rob has listed some discrepancies, the writing on the wall or the floor, the number confusion. We're told in one place that the locket was found in his pocket. It's got the photo in it. We're also told that the delivery person for the locket has arrived. And then there's a weird mention of a photograph in the newspaper, and we don't know who the photograph was of, which is all the more significant because we're told by the boarding house guy that he thought the photograph was originally his boarder, Jason Phelps, but it wasn't. That made us think they might be related. And then there's a little mention by the private eye that the 389, he found an ad for a harp for $389, and he thinks maybe that's it. From a meta perspective, the fact that the 389 has not been explained yet, and we have figured out it's Yakuza, seems to suggest to me that there really is the Yakuza. Otherwise, this game is being very clever about making us work to figure it out and having it be fake. Okay, Veggie Dog says, I think the woman in the locket is Hertz's sister, who conveniently is a cover for a closeted gay man. Is it possible that Reynolds and the sister are an item? No, it can't be the sister's photo in the locket because it can't be. Veggie Dog can't be right. It can't be Hertz's sister. Now, why can't it be Hertz's sister in the locket? Because the wife has seen the locket. And the wife has been living, the sister has been living with them in the past. The wife would recognize the sister. So it can't be the sister. The wife would immediately say, I recognize the photo in the locket. It's of my husband's sister. So it can't be that. Veggie Dog says, I think the locket was intended for Timothy. Okay, who's Timothy? I don't know who that is. Okay, I should not get angry at the channel, but I can see I am getting short with the channel. Let's have some coffee here. So what is my gut tell me is going on here? I do feel like there's Yakuza involved, but I'm torn on the idea of someone staging it to look like Yakuza. I'll tell you the part. Veggie Dog says Timothy Meacham is his theory about who Timothy was. Timothy Meacham is the chauffeur that's been fired. That seems like a red herring to me. So the problem with the idea of staging it to look like Yakuza. So Rob's theory was that he committed suicide and then someone's tried to make it look like a murder. That's problematic from my standpoint because we don't have anyone who should be motivated to make it look like a murder. Well, one of the problems is that it's not like there's a big insurance payoff that we know about that you would have to make it look like a murder and not a suicide. And so it doesn't, I don't get the motive. The other really odd thing is that he stabbed in the heart with a 10-inch curved bone-handled blade. I don't see how you get hold of such a blade. That's a very fancy blade. That makes us even more convinced it's Yakuza. You don't just walk around with a 10-inch long curved bone-handled blade knife. And then the other thing we're told is that the hand is cut off by a different blade than that blade. So whoever's doing this has got two knives. That makes it sound more like it was a Yakuza gang that did it as a group. There was some talk in the channel that two different people, like one killed him with the knife. You also wouldn't kill yourself with a knife, 10-inch long knife to the chest. That doesn't make sense, really. It's possible, but very unlikely. You would be much more likely to cut your throat or slit your wrists. Although you could cut off a hand to hide that you've slit your wrist. Although, spoiler, you don't slit your wrist by going across, so someone might. You cut into the veins vertically. Rob says seppuku was done that way. No, that's not right. Seppuku, the Japanese suicide, is not done by stabbing yourself in the heart. It's done by putting a knife in your guts and cutting across and ripping open your guts. So no, you don't stab yourself with a 10-inch long blade in your heart. By the way, one of my favorite movies is a Japanese samurai movie I highly recommend called not seppuku, but the other name for the ritualized suicide. Why is it's escaping me at the moment? It's been remade once or twice. I recommend the original. It's called Harakiri. I highly recommend it. It's a very slow burn, but it is one of my favorites. There's your there's your assignment for today. Go find the original Harakiri and watch that. So I don't really buy the suicide idea. But that doesn't mean I'm much more friendly to the idea that someone murdered him and made it look like Yakuza. I still think it's more likely that Yakuza actually did it, but I'm much more sympathetic to the idea of someone trying to make it look like Yakuza. I'm trying to think. I mean, it's pretty sophisticated. You cut off the hand and take the hand with you, but I guess if you were really planning on it, then you could bring the two knives. Cutting off and taking the hand, that's very involved, and you'd have to really... It's a little bit of a contradiction here. Like, if you think, well, they didn't know enough about the Yakuza to write the number correctly. They wrote 389 instead of 893, but then they knew enough to cut off a hand. The hand doesn't fully match. We don't really understand that, but that's a very weird thing to do, to take the hand. Now, we got locked into the idea that they're taking the hand as part of some Yakuza message, like, don't steal from us. I still think that's most likely, but what would be the alternative? Is there something else about the hand that someone would need to remove and hide? And that's what I don't know. Like, tattoo on the hand? No, because the wife would know about the tattoo, etc. So it's not clear why you would get rid of that hand. And then the woman in the locket is a whole separate mystery. If we think about the simplest explanation for the locket, it's that he's gone and ordered it for himself. That answers the question of who ordered it and who is it for. And that's the most consistent with everything we've heard about the receipt and where it's found. The only mystery then is, who is it of? One of our other good, strong theories is that Jason Phelps is his son, maybe a son to another mother that we haven't heard about, that he's keeping secret, and that the locket was going to be to give to his son, Jason Phelps. Who is Jason Phelps meeting with down at the wharf at the back of the bar? That's another big question. If it was Hertz, why? So one theory we had is that Hertz is gay and is meeting up with Jason Phelps, and he's fallen in love with him. And the picture is of Jason Phelps. That's still a fairly strong theory in my mind, that the photo in the locket is actually of Jason Phelps cross-dressing as a woman. That would explain why the boarding house person thought initially that the photo in the paper was Jason Phelps before he realized it was a woman and said, no, it's not. Is it possible? So here's a theory. The theory is that Hertz is living a double life. He's closeted, he's gay, and he's ripping off Yakuza, stealing from Yakuza, cheating them at cards or doing business dealings with them. And he's fallen in love recently with this young boy, Jason Phelps, who's sort of a cross-dresser. And he's told Jason Phelps, we're going to steal this money and go away together. And then he's caught out by Yakuza. It's not a great explanation. And maybe it's a little convoluted. I got another movie to recommend to you. You got 2 movie assignments for today. Harakiri, the original, not the remake, and a movie called Before the Devil Knows You're Dead. An adult, a movie not for children, but Philip Seymour Hoffman, a really good movie, recommended. Well, I think we might be ready to read the new letter. We've been talking for 45 minutes. Mark Matthews, who's been playing Dear Holmes. Mark, you have a subscription to Dear Holmes yourself, don't you? Is that right? Says, we think the picture in the locket is possibly Jason's mother and Cornelius is the father. That's the theory I was talking about before, that Jason Phelps is his long-lost son. I do think that's a reasonable possibility. And it might explain the part where he says he thought the photo was him. If the photo was really of Hertz, then them looking similar, it's a little bit of the bug in the game. Like if we knew what photo was in the paper, it would really help us lock down this part about how the boarding house person thought it was his tenant. And so Mark thinks that the photo is of the mother of Jason Phelps, who Hertz had a relationship with. I think that makes a lot of sense. That Jason Phelps is his illegitimate child. Is it possible, like the key that's found on Hertz, is it possible that Jason Phelps really lost it and Phelps has found it and is going to go return it to him? Rob says sometimes Seppuku was done that way. All right, I don't believe it. Joe J. Anderson says the curved knife in the heart should mean something as it was left and another knife is used to cut the hand. Yeah, it is weird that you would leave the one knife. Rob says there was no sign of struggle. Nobody heard a fight. That supports suicide. Okay, fair enough. DJ Moneycut says there's a pretty big time window between the death and discovery, so they would have time to do elaborate staging. That's a good point. Who is the white man seen leaving the apartment? The white-haired man. Do we think... It's possible that was a mistake, by the way. The witnesses aren't 100% sure about it. Joj says, I was thinking there might be something that was stuck on the hand like a ring, but then they would have cut the finger, yeah. DJ Moneycut says, Hertz is already rich. That would be dumb on his part to cheat the mob. It's true, but if you're talking about realism, plenty of people are stealing money to get richer. What's the name of the movie? This is going to be a movie recommendation video today. What's the name of the movie with Al Pacino playing the Latin gangster who gets out of jail. And Sean Penn is his lawyer. And a great performance by Sean Penn. What's the name of that movie? Carlito's Way. Go check out Carlito's Way as well. You got 3 movie recommendations. Carlito's Way, Harakiri, the original, and Before the Devil Knows You're Dead. Veggie Dog says, I think Hertz had a duplicate key to Phelps's apartment. Phelps broke it off with Hertz and then lied about losing the key to his landlord so that the lock would be changed. Yeah, it's an interesting idea. It's not a terrible idea. All right, let's read the next letter, which is going to help clarify a lot. 50 minutes in, we haven't even read the next letter, but that's what we sort of promised. The channel was very involved, interested in this case, so it was suitable for us to spend a lot of time talking about it. Before I read this, who is going to go do the movie assignments and watch those 3 movies? You have a week to watch them, and then I want to hear about it next Sunday. I'm not sure if I had to choose what theories I would, what of all of our theories I would go with. I guess so. Here's a okay. I guess I'm gonna get on the record with a little bit of a theory. Jason Phelps, who lives in the boarding house, who is now missing, was a fisherman. I think that would have you would have a very sharp knife if you're a fisherman. I kind of think that Phelps has killed him, maybe to make it look like Yakuza, and then has run off. I think maybe I'd be leaning towards that. But it's either Yakuza that killed him and the rest is just a sort of side issue. If it's Yakuza that killed him, then we've got separate tracks, right? The Yakuza killed him for stealing money. I think we were told Phillips worked at a lumber yard. Is that right? That doesn't seem right to me. Let me just, before I read this new letter, let me clarify that. Came looking for a room in late February, came from Seattle. Once he found work at the lumber warehouse. Well, you're right. It's near the wharf, but he got work at lumber warehouse. You are absolutely right. Well, good memory. All right, never mind that theory about him having sharp fishing knives. Not sure why I got hung up on that. Note also that the key has been missing for 3 weeks. Key has been missing for 3 weeks. That doesn't sound like it was honestly lost. That sounds like, but I don't know if that means the key was stolen or not. Okay. Here we go. June 15th. So this is over a week since the murder. Dear Mr. Holmes, even as I sit to write this letter, I hesitate to share what I have learned. Yet we must uncover the truth for the sake of Cornelius, in spite of how frightening it may be. I will be concise. I was contacted by somebody from Penbury, Matheson, and Sudrow yesterday, who claims to have known about the strange apartment where Cornelius was found. In addition to this, the police have located the man, a boy really, who was living in the room corresponding to Cornelius's 103 key. Whoa. Regarding the former, I was called on by a woman named Helen Martinez. She has been a secretary for Penbury for some 20 years or so, and for about 4 of them, she was responsible for some offices on the second floor of the building. At that time, this included my husband's office. Cornelius had already hired Reynolds by then, so for the most part, he only relied on her for correspondence awaiting him at Penbury. In spite of this, Cornelius appears to have entrusted Miss Martinez with a secret in those years, which she has now realized may be of great importance. According to the secretary, Mr. Hertz acquired a property in 1892. He had asked me to help him find something that he could purchase for little money, even if it meant an unfavorable neighborhood. He said he was going to fix it up into something admirable. Made me swear I wouldn't say anything because it would ruin the surprise, which made me think it was to be a gift for you or his father. The only times I recall Mr. Hertz using it were when principal clients demanded a conference without giving proper notice. The practice works with a number of clients who value their time and discretion above all, so the lawyers often hustle about to accommodate them, and in that way the apartment was quite handy. This was the relevant portion of her tearful monologue, and as you might have already guessed, I immediately took this to Reynolds. At his home, he told me, "Yes, I recall her. Cornelius had Helen take care of most of the mail and other minor tasks. She's friendly enough, but sometimes forgetful." After he noted this, I asked him if my husband was especially fond of her. Oh, he had no complaints that I knew. Reynolds shook his head, growing wide-eyed. "But do you think she and Cornelius?" I explained that Miss Martinez apparently knew about the apartment in which Cornelius's body was found, and Reynolds' face grew red. After some moments of silence, he apologized. "I'm sorry, I knew about it too, Miss Hertz, but I don't know what he used it for. Special clients was all he told me, and I never approved of him using your family's money to buy some tawdry property. He swore me to secrecy, and well, in truth, we did quarrel about this when I first learned what he'd done. All feels childish now, forgive me." Reynolds fell silent again, then suddenly looked to me, and I can't stop myself from thinking it concerns me, Mrs. Hertz, that Helen knew about the apartment too. Did she say anything else? I shook my head, no, and returned to my house. Why does Reynolds care about that? That makes me think Reynolds is up to no good. He's like, did she know anything else? Did she say anything else? This feels like Reynolds has done something, and he's curious if the Helen knows about it. Let's see. So I managed to... No, she tells him, and then she heads home. There I managed to fall asleep quickly, only to be woken up by more distressing news delivered personally by Inspector Hill. This morning, Inspector Hill informed me that Jason Phelps, who was living in room 103 at the boarding house in Meigs Wharf, had been located and is providing much information. In my opinion, the boy is telling them fish stories to distract them from the murder and exploit the death of my husband. You will agree once I explain what the inspector told me Mr. Phelps is claiming. First and foremost, the police were able to locate him because residents at the apartment building on 2nd Street reported a strange person lurking. This turned out to be Jason Phelps. Inspector Hill gave me a thorough account of the incident, which I will relay to you in my own words. A resident, Edna Miller, first observed a young man pacing in front of the building earlier in the day. He was peering into the building at every chance he could get, and Mrs. Miller is convinced she had seen him around before. Then she saw him attempting to enter the building, so she approached him and asked if he was looking for somebody. He said to her, "No, I live here too, but I lost my key." But he would not say which apartment was supposedly his, and when she offered to help him look for it, he declined and left without uttering another word. This she told a neighbor, Mr. Arthur Perez, who, in light of recent events, did not hesitate to call on the police. Inspector Hill and another officer arrived 30 minutes after this to no lurkers. However, after crossing the street in hopes of speaking with neighbors, they saw a young man approaching the entrance of Mrs. Miller's building. They followed him into the building, where Mrs. Miller, standing by her doorway, confirmed, "It's him." They rushed ahead and found him attempting to open the door to apartment 2G. That's where Hertz had his apartment. On being confronted, he was shaking, Inspector Hill mentioned, but not unwilling to answer questions. When they asked who he was, he responded, "Jason." He was stunned when the inspector guessed his family name in response. Even so, he did not attempt to hide the fact that he was truly Jason Phelps. The same Jason Phelps who had been staying at the Powell Street boarding house and working at a warehouse near Meigs Wharf. In fact, Inspector Hill described him as almost eager to mention that he needed our help and that he was turning tail. These facts he conveniently coupled with another delusion that he is entitled to the apartment he was attempting to break into. According to the boy, there's an ominous man pursuing him. He has no idea who the man might be or what he might want, just that the man has hair the color of snow and that he'd seen him before near the wharf. He claims the man finally tried to break into his room at the boarding house some days ago, and that although he somehow escaped without injury, he had decided to hide and was in fear of his life. When questioned about apartment 2G, he insists that it's mine and that's all you need to know. He refuses to say much else about the topic, and when pressed by the inspectors, he only added, "Well, it's not being used by anyone, is it?" For reasons I cannot fathom, the police have allowed him to go about roaming freely after questioning him. Mr. Brando has promised me he will attempt to interview Phelps for himself, but I, with respect, fail to see what yet another exchange of mere words will yield for my case. Mr. Holmes, I have been led to believe that you are a man without match when it comes to these baffling circumstances. If that is truly the case, then please finally put an end to all this and help ensure my husband's killer is arrested. So Phelps is lurking, trying to get into the apartment where Hertz was killed, that Hertz bought. And he claims it's owed to him. That makes us think that Hertz has told him the apartment is his. And Jason is being pursued by the silver-haired man who was last seeing you leaving Hertz's apartment. And he says the silver-haired man, or man with the hair of snow, has been chasing him. That sounds all believable. It's either completely believable and the same man that's chasing Phelps is chasing Hertz and killed Hertz, or Phelps is making it up because Phelps has some snow-colored wig that he's using, but that doesn't seem right. But snow-colored hair could be being worn by Reynolds, or it could be a snow-colored hair of some Yakuza boss that's killed him. Any initial reactions to the first letter? Rob says 1892. Wow, 9 years ago. Okay, don't know what that's about. Mr. Hertz acquired the property in 1892. Okay, so that's the date that he acquired this property long ago. Okay. We've still got 2 more sheets of paper. Mark Matthews says the first letter said he only rented it for 8 months. You're right, it did. It feels like we've got bugs. Mark and Rob both say, in the first letter, we're told the police investigated the apartment and found that Hertz had started renting it 8 months ago, and now we're learning that he owned it for 9 years. Feels like some pretty dramatic bugs in this game. Okay, let's move to our next letter. 2 of 3. It looks like we're going to get a long letter from the PI, Brando. Dear Mr. Holmes, much has occurred since I last wrote to you. Amy Hertz has finally made an appearance and has shared a number of curious details, but I'm putting the cart before the horse. I believe you are already, at least in part, aware that Jason Phelps was located, that among other tall tales, he's claiming to be in danger. I assured Mrs. Hertz I would question him myself, which I have done, and after investigating his claims, I'm inclined to agree with Mrs. Hertz. There is something queer about him. I learned from the police that Phelps was allowed to return home yesterday after his interrogation, with the agreement that he would return to their station this afternoon and give additional testimony. Knowing this, I decided to cast my lot by visiting the Powell Street boarding house early this morning. Room 103 was empty when I arrived, but the owner, Mr. Novikov, kindly pointed me towards the saloon down the street. I saw Jason walk there an hour ago, he said. In point of fact, a sole young man was enjoying a fish stew at the bar when I walked in. He thought I was another inspector when he spotted me approaching him. I nodded yes and corrected him, but not with the police. His expression softened when I said this, and I offered to pay for his stew in exchange for a short, honest conversation. Mr. Phelps acquiesced, and thus my interview began. Mr. Holmes, the boy's claims are alarming, if not questionable. I figure it will be easy to see if you simply review his account of recent events, beginning with the evening of June the 3rd. Mr. Phelps claims, as you have been told, that apartment 2G, where Cornelius Hertz's body was found, is supposed to belong to him. That the owner, Mr. Hertz presumably, wished it so, although Phelps had yet to move his belongings into the property. And here things grow even more peculiar. Phelps says that he first came to know Mr. Hertz some months ago, after the death of his mother. She had been ill for some time, and in her last days she urged Phelps, should she pass, to find an old friend of hers who she swore would offer him help on learning of her condition. Phelps says her health Phelps says her health failed her in the spring, and that he left for San Francisco with her obituary in one hand and 2 facts about Mr. Hertz in the other, his full name and his place of employment. The boy says that he was too nervous and first devoted time to finding some form of employment near the wharf, where he had managed to secure an inexpensive room. When he finally did so, he mustered the courage to venture into the city and made his way to Penbury's offices, where he tells me that he watched the lawmen go in and out for hours at a time, until he finally heard someone cry Cornelius in the midst of their conversation. The man was unfortunately not Cornelius Hertz, but he was indeed speaking of Mr. Hertz, who was inside the building at the time. Phelps says he was told to wait outside some minutes and that Mr. Hertz emerged with his secretary a short time afterwards. His story is that the two men were kind, and especially Mr. Cornelius, even before I showed them my mother's obituary. He was too busy to speak with me for long that first day, but he said he wanted to talk more and asked where I was staying. He visited me at the wharf 2 days later, and he's been an awfully great help since then. Said he would pay for tutors to teach me to read proper so I can get a job outside of the warehouse. Said he'd fix up my room at the boarding house real nice. He said that he meant it. He said that and he meant it. Came back not 2 weeks later and paid somebody to fix the window in my room and brought me new bedding. Then in May, the 20th or 21st, he promised that he was going to bring me a small stove. He insisted on delivering it himself, but wasn't able to do so at a predictable hour, and I was working odd hours at the warehouse. So I offered him my key and asked for a spare. He didn't return for another week or so, but when he did, he didn't bring anything. Instead, he told me he had a better place for me to live in and that he needed some time before I could go. I agreed, and on the first day of June, we spoke again. Mr. Cornelius told me he needed to retrieve the spare key from somebody, but that I could meet him at the new apartment on the night of the 3rd. It was around 8 when I arrived at the building that night. I looked for 2G like Mr. Cornelius told me, but when I got there and knocked on the door, nobody answered. I felt like a fool. I waited outside for maybe an hour or two, but the only person I saw entering or exiting the building was a tall older man with white hair who stepped outside for several seconds before returning to the building. I made my journey back to the wharf that night and hoped I would hear from Mr. Cornelius soon, but nothing. Then 3 days later, minutes after getting back from the saloon, I heard somebody outside my door. Knowing Mr. Cornelius still had my key, I waited, expecting him to announce himself as he unlocked it, but that didn't happen. It sounded as if somebody was scraping at the door. Then there was the sound of something metal tapping against the lock, so I called out, "Mr. Cornelius?" Nobody answered, but the sound stopped, so I went to the door. When I opened it, the white-haired man from Mr. Cornelius's apartment was standing at the end of the hall, holding a knife in silence. Before I could say anything, one of my neighbors, Mr. Gus Lafayette, opened his door and screamed in shock. This startled the man, who then fled from our boarding house. Gus ran outside after him with another resident, Mr. Stanley Robeson, but they lost sight of him in the fog. I could tell that the man had been scratching at my lock with something. I think he was trying to get into my room, and just above my doorknob, he'd carved 3 numbers, 3, 8, and 9. Phillips claimed that he will remain at the Powell Street boarding house for the time being, now that he is certain the white-haired man is being investigated, and did not seem opposed to speaking with me again should I have any additional questions. Apart from this, I have 2 small accounts of information to report. The first gathered from Mr. Reynolds' sister after my exchange with Phelps, and the second from Miss Amy Hertz. Let's pause for a second. Think about the second letter we read. I think I've got a theory. A picture is coming clear to me here. Well, one of the theories we guessed, that Jason Phelps was the long-lost son of Cornelius Hertz, seems very true now. That explains how the 2 people, the photo looked like our dead guy. I think what we've got is Cornelius Hertz had an illegitimate son, and now the mother has died, and Phelps has returned to meet Cornelius to ask for his help, which he has, and Cornelius is now helping him. We get explained about the key partially, that Cornelius was given the key. That was our original theory, that he was given the key and then the kid goes and asks for a spare. But I think the key, the piece of information that is subtle here, which the channel has not come up with yet, I can see in the chat. Well, let's see. Who can guess what I'm thinking of? Here's how I see it. The whole gay angle was wrong. I believe that Cornelius Hertz slept with the woman that Reynolds was in love with. And Reynolds didn't know that. So what's happened is that Cornelius Hertz has fathered an illegitimate child with this woman. And it turns out it was the woman that Reynolds was in love with. But Reynolds doesn't know that. Then this kid comes back, runs into Cornelius with Reynolds, shows him the obituary, and Reynolds now figures out that his best friend Cornelius Hertz has not only stolen this woman away from him, but has had a child with her. And now Reynolds has killed Hertz and is trying to make it look like Yakuza and is wearing this wig to look like this to disguise himself. I think that's what we've got. What does the channel think about that? So Phelps has showed up at his work. He overhears someone talking about Cornelius. They go get Mr. Hertz with his secretary. He's got the obituary. Everyone, the two men were kind, especially Cornelius, before I showed them mother's obituary. The moment he shows it, Reynolds realizes what's happened, that Cornelius stole away his wife, the girl he loved, and lied to him about it. So at this point, we've got the tracks separate, where Reynolds is plotting out the murder of Hertz, and Hertz is trying to set his son up with a new life. And then Reynolds is dressing up in this wig, scratching out the numbers, trying to make it look like Yakuza, and is trying to kill off the son too, in anger and revenge. And Reynolds has made up this fake story about the fight being over funds, but really the fight is just Reynolds furious about all this and wanting revenge. Now, there was a little detail about the key. And it sounds like he gave... Sounds like maybe Reynolds had the key, but why? We need to read this part again about how he has to get the key from someone else. He wants to deliver a stove, so he borrows the key. He gave him a key. Cornelius told me he had to retrieve the spare key from somebody. Ah, that's weird. What's that about? Why would he give the key? Maybe, I'm not sure about that. Rob doesn't like my theory. Rob says, why would a wig make him unrecognizable? They met, so he knew how he looked. Well, they met one in brief passing. Would Reynolds want to kill Phelps himself as well? That's pretty harsh. Okay, the channel doesn't believe that he would kill that Reynolds would kill the illegitimate child as revenge. We'll see. Okay, so again, 389 number that the white-haired man is carved in. This feels now not like Yakuza. This is someone trying to make it look like that to me. Okay. He says, apart from this, I have here's our final 2 pages of letter. 2 small accounts of information to report. First gathered from Mr. Reynolds after my exchange with Phelps. The second from Miss Amy Hertz. I paid a visit to Mr. Reynolds earlier today, having acquired his address from Mrs. Hertz, and was able to speak with him for roughly 15 minutes. He was finishing cleaning the kitchen as I arrived, he told me, and was soon leaving to meet somebody, though he welcomed me warmly. The man's home is sparsely decorated. It was evident he had not swept or cleaned in some time. Besides his sofa and a short pine table with just a single rocking chair, he keeps a small stove and a withered set of cabinets in the room. There were few decorative items, a single painting of horses enjoying their feed, some photographs on the cabinets, some of his younger self with similarly dressed boys, all students, one of a young woman labeled Mildred, his sister likely. I think it's the mother of Phelps, who he's in love with. And a couple of faded photos of a ranch. He insisted he had to finish cleaning as I looked about, but he was happy to humor my inquiries. Psychologically, it feels like he's just trying to distract himself from the conversation. As Mrs. Hertz has likely mentioned, the secretary has become gravely concerned that Japanese criminals are responsible for the murder. His theory stems primarily from the fact that Mr. Hertz worked with certain clients who were party to illegal enterprises, though Cornelius always said their business with Penbury Matheson and Sudro was strictly legitimate. Mr. Reynolds also believed that the number written beside Hertz's corpse, 389, was a sort of signature used by the supposed Japanese criminals. However, my associate, Dr. Masao Smith, who is a professor at the St. Ignatius College and whose mother is a native of the country in question, was able to dispel the theory for me last week, and with confidence. Look, this is exactly what the channel in the audience figured out that I was skeptical of. He laughed when I brought up the conundrum and explained that it was an interesting hypothesis, if not a fairly reasonable mistake, as the number sequence 893, not 389, is often used to refer to certain groups of lawbreakers, in Japan that is. To his knowledge, there is nothing significant about the number 389. With respect to Japanese criminals, before learning this, I had only told Reynolds I thought his theory was far-fetched. So I was sure to present him with this information when I spoke to him on this occasion. He was clearly embarrassed when I revealed what Dr. Smith had explained, but it did not entirely convince him. "You don't know these sorts of criminals. They're wealthy," he cried, wringing a mess of a fine white mop. "They do business with all the other rich men, and then they go around killing people and committing all sorts of crimes they can get away with." He was clearly shaken by the murder, so I assured him again that even if such criminals had been involved, they were most certainly in hiding. This calmed him, but I feared the poor man may struggle to recover from this tragedy. As for Miss Amy Hertz, know that she has given the police information about the quarrel between her and her brother and the infamous letter that inspired it. So I thought the letter was going to be about homosexual activity. Maybe it's not, but it's clearly not now. I also had the opportunity to interview her myself as she is staying at the house with Mrs. Hertz, who promptly sent for me on her arrival. The young student did not seem pleased by the situation, but agreed to answer my questions in private. Petiel says, wait, Reynolds has white hair? Where are we told that Reynolds has white hair? I missed that. Seems like a key piece of information for me to skip over. Photo of his younger self with Mildred, who I think could be the woman. Where does it say that Reynolds had white hair? Can you... White mop is white wig. What? The white mop? He's cleaning. Isn't he using a mop? You don't know these sorts of criminals. They're wealthy, he cried, wringing a mess of a fine white mop. That's a weird statement. Wringing a mess of a fine... I just took that to be a real mop since he's cleaning his house. He insisted he had to finish cleaning as I looked about. He's cleaning his house. But this could be the wig, yes, that he's wearing. But I took this to be the mop that he's using to clean up. So it is weird, but maybe he's afraid it'll be found, so he's cleaning with it. Let's see what the channel says. So I don't think he has fine white hair. I think it's an actual physical mop, but it still could be used as what he's using as his wig. I think I'll agree with that. All right, that was a good catch, though. All right. So they're talking to the sister, questions in private. To make matters simpler for her, I asked only that she repeat what she told the inspectors at the police station. She did so somberly, hiding her eyes between large tangles of black hair. Slowly, and perhaps on the verge of tears throughout, Miss Hertz told me of the quarrel with her brother, which she claims transpired after Mr. Hertz discovered a letter she had written and left in her bedroom. I didn't think I was going to send it, honest. I just needed to say how I felt, and I couldn't, so I wrote it all down. She believes that Cornelius was worried I would send it to Father, or that I'd show Maggie. I'm sure that worried him too, but I wouldn't have done that. I still don't really know exactly what Cornelius was doing, just that it was odd. But I was angry at the time. I had figured out he was discreetly sending money to somebody, to the mother of Jason Phelps. Naturally, I asked Miss Hertz how she came to this realization, and she claims, well, I had found an envelope stuffed with cash in his room maybe a year or so before my last visit, when he told me to leave. When I found the first envelope, I thought nothing of it. But then I found another envelope some months later, hidden somewhere else in the house, with a short time after that, a small package wrapped like a gift. All of these were addressed to MP. That's Mildred Pierce. And the address written on one of them was in the same place called Queen Anne. Turns out there's a town in Washington, Seattle, Washington. Still, I wasn't sure what to do until I came back last time and took my time looking around the house. I found a note, carefully folded and tucked beneath the inkwell in Cornelius's study. The message was simple. I could never forget it. It only said, "Thank you always, MP." So I couldn't help but think the worst of Cornelius. Who was MP? Why were they worthy of gifts? And why would Cornelius keep those gifts hidden? And did Maggie know? Surely not. But how could I manage to ask something so foul? It's clear now that I knew nothing. Cornelius, well, they were wringing money from him, Mr. Brando. I think my brother was being extorted. I wrote this all down and asked Miss Hertz if there were any other details leading her to believe he was being extorted, and she angrily reminded me of his death. Consequently, I thanked her for humoring my inquisition and said my farewells to she and Miss Hertz. My esteemed colleague, I leave you with this report and ask that you suggest a course of action. Miss Hertz's statements only seem to muddle my existing theories, and after speaking with Jason Phelps myself, I'm questioning every prior shred of evidence. To me, it seems the boy is presenting far too many convenient reasons for which he is intimately familiar with Mr. Hertz's murder, to say nothing of the fact I find myself doubting that the white-haired man is pursuing him. We are but inches from the truth. I'm certain, nevertheless, I worry that our killer will escape the law. I await your word. So, MP is going to be the Mildred that is in Reynolds' house. So I believe my theory is right, what I was saying, that Reynolds was in love. His whole heart was devoted to this woman, Mildred Pierce, or Phelps, Mildred Phelps, right? He was the love of her life. And it turns out that she fathered a child. She was having an affair with Cornelius Hertz back in the day. And Cornelius has been sending her money because of his illegitimate child. When she dies, the child, Jason Phelps, goes to meet Cornelius and runs into Cornelius with his secretary, Reynolds, who puts two and two together and realizes, oh my God, my best friend stole the love of my life away from me, fathered a child with her, and Reynolds decides to murder Cornelius Hertz and make it look like the Yakuza have done it. Danielle says Reynolds was meeting with Phelps at the bar, probably find out more about him. I don't think there's any reason to think that it wasn't Hertz meeting with him at the bar. Either way, though. Rob says it's weird that Phelps didn't recognize Reynolds. I think it's likely that he never saw Reynolds before, except for that brief meeting at the office, and he probably didn't even pay attention to him. He's probably focused on his father. Danielle says it was previously mentioned that between Reynolds and Hertz, Reynolds was the better dressed one, and it was often mistaken who was the secretary. Rob says it's weird that Reynolds wanted to kill Phelps as well, although one explanation would be that he thought Phelps had seen him and wanted to get rid of him as a witness. Maybe, or maybe he's just so full of rage at the child of the girl he loved. But I guess you could, well, I don't think, Rob, your theory would make sense, but I don't think it works because he wasn't a witness. Daniel says, I think maybe he just wanted to threaten Phelps. I'm not sure what that would benefit him. DJ Moneycut says, maybe he wasn't going to kill Phelps, but just use the knife to scratch the number on the door and scare him off. I guess, but why do you have to scare him off? What would be the point of taking such a big risk? But it's possible. It's possible that you just want to leave more evidence, more clues, but I'm not sure what that benefits you. I suppose you could try to claim that you want Phelps to run so that the police think it's him. I'm going to stick with my theory, though, that he was so filled with rage that he wanted to kill the son as well. Okay. Well, pretty cool that this seems to have wrapped up with this last letter with a very consistent theory. The only thing that I find a little odd is this part about how Cornelius didn't have the key and had to get it back. Let's look at this thing. He hears the scratching. The white-haired man, older man, white hair, stepped out. Oh, he does witness. Oh, he does witness. He arrives at the building. No one answers. He waits outside. I see. I see. I think Cornelius has given Reynolds the key for some reason, and that he's arranged to give the key back or something. Or maybe he's going to tell, you know what, I wonder if the thing he said I have to do, here we got it. He tells his wife, it's long overdue, I got to do this thing. I think his plan was to have the three of them meet in the apartment and tell Reynolds. Possibly that was the plan that's overdue. Though we're told he doesn't get there till 10, so that feels a little wrong. This is feels like a little bit buggy. But he says, could you meet him in the apartment on the night of the 3rd at 8 p.m.? So it looks like that Hertz has arranged to meet this guy at 8 in the apartment in 3G. And when he arrives, no one's answering the door. That's because Reynolds has met him there and has killed him. So he can't get in. So our guy goes across the street, and while he's there, he sees Reynolds with white hair step outside to take a break after having murdered Hertz, and then go back in. So I wonder if Cornelius Hertz planned to have the three of them meet together, or maybe he just planned to meet Jason Phelps, but Reynolds killed him first. And maybe it's just a red herring that he kept having, that he didn't have the key to give back till earlier. And here he is meeting Reynolds in the white wig. Let's just read this to see if we can figure out if Reynolds wanted to kill him. The guy comes in, he sees him. Sounded as if someone was scraping at the door. Sound of something metal tapping. He's carving it out. He says, Cornelius. Nobody answered. The sound stopped. I went to the door. When I opened it, the white-haired man from the apartment was standing at the end of the hall holding a small knife in silence. And then he gets scared away. I don't know. Maybe he wasn't trying to kill him. Maybe he was just leaving this note. If Mildred was Reynolds' sister, then it makes... They're not sister. It's his lost love, not sister. He told Phelps to be at the apartment at 8, but Hertz didn't arrive until 10. Why? I think that must be a mistake. Mark Matthews says, right, Hertz was seen entering at 10. That's got to be a mistake. Don't you think? DJ Moneycut says, was Hertz trying to locate Reynolds during that time, so that's why he was late getting into the apartment? It's true that the witness said he arrived at 10. Maybe we need to reread that. Maybe he's gone to visit Reynolds and Reynolds has killed him off-site. Let's read the note about how he was last seen at 10, because that does feel like maybe a bug or maybe something we're missing. Otherwise, I think we've basically wrapped up this case. So what we're looking for is the witnesses. Okay, let's see if we can read that 10 p.m. thing. We made a big note of it. He leaves his house at 7. He says, I'll be back by 9:30. So that would be consistent with planning on meeting his son, Jason Phelps, at the apartment at 8. And now we're told that they did plan to meet at 8. So the question is, why is he not there at 10? Now let's read this. According to the person residing next to the building entrance, Cornelius arrived some minutes past 10 on the 3rd. Another neighbor confirmed she was smoking out front around 10 when she saw Cornelius enter the building. Okay. This seems like we got 2 witnesses. I guess the way you'd have to explain it. So here's Cornelius coming to the apartment at 10 and never leaving. And from our latest letter, Jason Phelps says the white-haired guy arrives around 8, leaving and coming back in. So I guess here's the story that I would come up with. Reynolds has the key. Maybe Reynolds borrowed it to say, I'll deliver the stove, whatever. And Cornelius decides that he's going to meet up with Reynolds, tell him, and then head over to the apartment to meet up with Jason Phelps at 8. So at 7 he leaves. He's going to go tell Reynolds, and then he's going to meet up or get the key from Reynolds and meet up with the kid in the apartment. And instead, Reynolds goes to the apartment. I really don't. Something had to waylay Cornelius until 10 p.m. and Reynolds is waiting inside for him. Or this is a bug. But boy, 2 witnesses, it doesn't sound like a bug. I wonder if this is just I really wonder if this isn't misidentifying Reynolds as Hertz. I like the idea that these witnesses were wrong. Not like they know him that well. It seems more likely to me that Reynolds is waiting here for him and kills him and then comes back in at 10. Little weird. Let me see if the channel has a better theory for that. DJ Moneycut was sort of thinking what I was saying. Was Hertz trying to locate Reynolds during that time, so that's why he was late getting to the apartment? Boy, he's 2 hours late, though. Hediol says, Hertz had to get the boarding house key from someone. Was that person Reynolds? That's what I was thinking. Rob says, it can't be a mistake. Multiple witnesses see him arriving at 10. How did Reynolds know about the plan to meet at the apartment? Did Hertz tell him? Joe J. Anderson says, Phelps said the man in the wig entered the apartment again, so waiting for Hertz maybe, then leaving before 6 a.m., spotted by the neighbor. Yeah, I mean, my theory is the thing that he says is overdue is that he's going to tell Reynolds and confess. So it makes sense to me that he tells Reynolds, maybe he tells Reynolds at like 7 o'clock. So here's an idea. Here's an idea for you. I think no matter how you do it, Reynolds has killed Hertz, killed him in the apartment. I might guess that what's happened is this. He's killed. Hertz says to his wife at 7 p.m., I got to do something I've put off for too long. He's arranged to meet the kid at the apartment at 8 p.m. I think he's gone to Reynolds, told Reynolds, perhaps, or asked Reynolds to meet him in the apartment at 7:30 or whatever, 8. And Reynolds has come and killed him. At 8 p.m., the kid arrives, knocks on the door, no answer, goes across the street, sees the guy in the white wig, which is Reynolds, having already killed Hertz. Go out, have a smoke, look around, come back, stage the body, maybe dress up as Cornelius Hertz. Maybe he goes home, dresses up as Hertz, and comes in the building at 10 p.m. to give himself an alibi or something to make it look like Hertz was still alive. So I guess my explanation for the 10 p.m., even though we have 2 witnesses, is that it's actually fake and he was dead by 8. The other alternative is that somehow Cornelius Hertz has been delayed for 3 hours. But I don't believe it. I think he was dead and Reynolds is making it look like he's still alive. But could go either way. Rob says, how did Reynolds know about the plan? Did Hertz tell him? That's my theory. My theory is the thing he says is long overdue to his wife at 7 is that Hertz has realized he's got to tell Reynolds. And that's what he's done, which has precipitated this. Joe J. Anderson says, Phelps says the man in the wig entered the apartment again, so waiting for Hertz maybe, then leaving before 6. Wouldn't Reynolds have known at the first meeting with Phelps? Don't know what wouldn't he have known what happened? Possibly. He had his mother's obituary and everything. Reynolds must have understood that Phelps was Hertz and Mildred's son. I do think it is more likely that he would know right at the start. But it's possible that either Reynolds didn't know, or maybe what Hertz told Reynolds was, I'm going to come clean. I'm going to tell my wife we're going to adopt the boy and lived happily ever after. And maybe that's what pushed Reynolds over the edge. Or maybe Reynolds didn't see the obituary, although it says he showed it to them. Maybe it's just that Reynolds knew, but was pushed to act right now because Hertz was about to tell him the truth. Remember that Hertz has not told the boy that he's the father. So maybe Hertz tells Reynolds, I'm going to tell this boy I'm the father and adopt him, and that was all too much. Pedial says, do we know if the secretary that was with Hertz was Reynolds? Could it have been the female secretary? Well, that's an interesting thought. That it wasn't, that Reynolds just found out today because he wasn't the one who was with Hertz when the kid came with the obituary. That's a clever idea. It does say they heard someone speaking of Cornelius. Short time later, wait outside, Hertz emerged with his secretary. Oh, no. It's not a woman's secretary. It is the 2 men. So sure seems like it had to have been Reynolds. And he showed them the obituary. But maybe Reynolds doesn't see it and doesn't know. Either Reynolds sees it now and it just takes him a while to put his plan in action and to come to a boil, or he doesn't realize it. Or maybe he realizes it, but Hertz doesn't realize he knows it. So Hertz decides at 7 p.m., I'm going to go confess to Reynolds, and they get into an argument and a fight. That would be another explanation. They get into an argument and a fight, and somehow Hertz doesn't get to the apartment by 10. I still like the idea better that he showed up at the apartment and Reynolds has killed him, and then Reynolds has dressed up as Cornelius to make it look like he's still alive by 10, and that the witnesses are wrong. But where are the witnesses? I mean, the witnesses don't get such a good look at everyone. I guess they know Cornelius. But I'm suspicious of witnesses. So that's why Reynolds is looking for that locket. He wants it. She was smoking out front. I'm just trying to look at the 10 p.m. thing again. Left no later than 6 a.m. No, not sure. Straw-colored raincoat. We haven't seen anything about that. So I guess we don't know we're not convinced about our theory of the 10 p.m. thing. But I don't think it's that important. Was the locket for Phelps then? I guess it could have been for Phelps. It could have been for the boy. Yes. Whose real name is going to be Hertz once he tells him. Why would Reynolds inquire about the locket, though? He knows it's been found, so he can't hide it. Plus, he knows it was ordered by her. I'll tell you why, because it's what Petiol said. If you assume that Reynolds doesn't put together the facts when they first meet, no, that doesn't make sense. Okay, but so he kills him. Maybe he just wants to find out if the silversmith knows the details. Maybe he's just trying to confirm from the silversmith that the silversmith doesn't know any more details. All right. Well, next week, hopefully, we'll get the official solution from Holmes. I believe we know the basic outlines of what's happened here, and we'll send off a quick note to the police to tell them to not let Reynolds take Reynolds' passport because he may be fleeing soon. 2-hour discussion here on letter 3. That makes sense. A real pleasure, as always. Good work, everyone, on this. Our early theories didn't quite hold up, but we did catch whiff of some of these possibilities. And I think the best congratulations has to go to those of you who picked out early that the transposition of the digits suggested someone trying to frame the Yakuza. I think that the suicide was wrong, but the theory that the numbers wouldn't have been mistransposed by real Yakuza turned out to be right on the money, and that was a very clever observation. Okay, so as Rob points out, the discussion will continue on the Discord for this channel. Everyone is welcome. You can find a link on the About page of the YouTube channel, along with some other links, including one to the Board Game Geek Guild for this channel, where we discuss upcoming schedule. So that discussion will continue tomorrow. Next Sunday at 3 p.m., we'll read the solution to this case from Holmes. Also, next Sunday at 1 p.m., I will be doing my update, 3-year anniversary update for the channel. I hope you can join me for that. We'll be playing some games this week as well. If you jump into the Board Game Geek Game Queue thread for this channel, you can help us decide what games to play next and when. And I'll see you then.